So it's time for another version comparison. This is WipEout XL on the Sony PlayStation and SEGA Saturn. We'll be comparing both versions. I've previously done WipEout and also Destruction Derby on the Saturn and PlayStation and compared both versions. This one was actually requested by a fellow YouTuber, Simon Locke. He posted a comment on my WipEout video to say he wanted to see what 2097 looked like on the PlayStation up against the Saturn, because he'd been told that it was awful, or someone had said to him that they thought it was awful. So we're in the PlayStation menu screens now, and you can see I'm just toggling through the options, going through the ships here. You can see the Physar ship, which I always choose for this game because it's a good all-round ship. And then we'll look at the track as well. You can see there's the model of the track spinning around. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to start a normal race. And you can see Red Bull sponsoring this game. And it's loading up. I haven't cut the loading times down, so you can kind of get an idea of how the loading time is on both the PlayStation and the SEGA Saturn. And now we've switched over to the SEGA Saturn menu. And you can see again, everything looks pretty similar, to be honest, graphically. There's not a huge amount of difference. There's again the ship selection screen, where again I'm going to select the Physar. And here is the track selection screen. Again, I'm going to choose the same track so we can do a proper comparison with everything being as close to being the same as possible on both versions. And the Saturn version, again, appears to load faster than the PlayStation version. It appears to take less time to get to the race. And then we're going to have them side by side as the race starts. So here we go. Saturn on the right, PlayStation on the left. And I'm going to deliberately go from side to side, as you're going to see on both footage, and straight away it's apparent that the Saturn has a lesser frame rate. It has a lower frame rate than the PlayStation version again. It also looks a little bit darker than the PlayStation image. That's not me messing about with the colours or the brightness or anything. The settings were exactly the same from the FrameMeister and the video capture that I've done for this particular video. And as well, to me, it looks a little bit rougher on the SEGA Saturn. It looks a little bit more pixelated. Again, highlighting the fact that the Saturn seemed to struggle with 3D graphics, which was something that was talked about a lot back in the day. Again, SEGA tried to do something about that at the last minute by shoving in an extra processor, but that had the knock-on effect of making the Saturn very, very complicated to develop games for, and also, especially porting games across from other systems, it would have made that job much, much harder as well, because the architecture of the system was much more complex. Another smaller thing that I've noticed, you can see there's Red Bull advertising in the PlayStation version, which is completely absent from the SEGA Saturn version altogether. I'm not sure if that's the same across the board in all versions, so whether the PAL version will also be lacking the Red Bull sponsorship, but this version clearly is, as you can see, as we went underneath that board there. So the Saturn version isn't terrible by any means, but the frame rate again will have an impact on the gameplay. There's also the effects of things like the rockets and the missiles being, fired. It all looks a little bit odd, I've got to be honest, on the Saturn. Especially the sort of smoke effects, they all look a bit weird. But there you go, we finished the race at pretty much the same time on both consoles. So a very consistent run on both machines for me, considering the frame rate differences and whatnot. And at the end, another thing Simon requested is some still shots. So here is a still from the PlayStation version, and an equivalent still from the same point in time and the same area on the Saturn version, and then one last still from the PlayStation, and one last still from the Saturn. Thanks for watching, guys.